The bed is 13 feet long. Not metaphorical. Not exaggerated. 13 feet of iron and stone, built to hold a man too large for normal furniture. King Hog of Bashan sleeps in it every night. When he stands, grown men barely reach his chest. When he walks, the ground trembles. When he goes to war, armies flee before seeing his face. He is the last of the rephaim, the giant race that survived the flood. The final remnant of the Nephilim bloodline that God tried to erase. And Moses is about to ask God if they should fight him. This is Hog lore, the story of the last giant king, and the nation that had to face what shouldn't exist. If giants walked the earth after the flood, comment, giants are real right now. Let's see who's paying attention. Hog wasn't just tall. He was ancient. Jewish tradition says he survived the flood by clinging to the outside of Noah's Ark. Whether literal or legendary, one thing is certain, Hog predated Israel by centuries. He was already ruling Bashan when Abraham arrived in Canaan. Genesis 14 mentions him indirectly. He was there when the kings of the east invaded. He watched empires rise and fall. He outlived generations of normal men. By the time Moses led Israel out of Egypt, Hog had been king for hundreds of years. 60 fortified cities answered to him. Bashan, the fertile tableland east of the Sea of Galilee, was his kingdom. The land of giants. His people were called rephaim. The dead ones, or the fallen ones. Descendants of the Nephilim who somehow survived God's flood judgment. They were warriors, all of them towering over normal humans. But Hog was their king. The largest. The strongest. The most terrifying. Deuteronomy 3 verse 11 describes him clinically. Hog king of Bashan was the last of the rephaim. His bed was decorated with iron and was more than 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. 9 cubits. 13 feet long. 6 feet wide. And that's just his bed. He had to be even larger to need that much space. Normal beds in ancient Israel were 6 feet long. Hog's bed was more than twice that. Made of iron, rare, expensive, powerful. Only a king who feared nothing would waste iron on furniture. It was a statement. A warning. A monument to invincibility. This wasn't legend. After Israel defeated Hog, they kept his bed. Displayed it. Measured it. Recorded it for history. The bed still existed when Moses wrote Deuteronomy. It is still in Rabbah of the Ammonites, the text says. Physical proof that giants walked the earth. 60 fortified cities. Walls reaching to heaven. Gates and bars of bronze. Bashan was a fortress kingdom ruled by a man too large to be real. But he was real. Israel had just defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites. The victory was significant, but Sihon was human. Normal-sized. Beatable. Then scouts brought word, Hog is coming. The army that had just celebrated victory went silent. They knew the stories. Giants in the land. The same report that terrified their fathers 40 years earlier. Numbers 13:33, the original spies had seen them. We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. That fear kept an entire generation out of the promised land. They wandered 40 years in the desert because they couldn't face giants. Now their children were about to face the king of giants. Hit subscribe, you need to see how this ends. 40 years earlier, 12 spies entered Canaan. They came back with reports of abundance, grapes so large it took 2 men to carry 1 cluster. Milk and honey. Fertile land. Everything God promised. Then they mentioned the inhabitants. The people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. Anak. The giant clans. Descendants of the Nephilim. 10 of the 12 spies said, we can't attack those people, they are stronger than we are. The land devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. Then came the line that defined a generation. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Grasshoppers. The people believed the bad report. They wept all night. They wanted to stone Moses and Aaron. They talked about going back to Egypt. God was furious. How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me? The judgment was severe. Not one of you will enter the land except Caleb and Joshua. As for your children, they will enter the land you have rejected. But as for you, your bodies will fall in this wilderness. 40 years. An entire generation died in the desert because they couldn't face giants. Now their children stood at Edrei. Hog of Bashan, king of the rephaim, last of the giants, was coming with his entire army. Would this generation repeat their father's fear? Or would they trust that the God who parted the Red Sea could handle a 13-foot king? Og came out with his entire army to Edrei. He didn't hide behind his fortress walls. Didn't wait for Israel to siege his cities. He came to meet them in open battle. Because he had never lost. Couldn't lose. He was too big, too strong, too ancient. His soldiers were giants, rephaim warriors towering over normal men. His reputation was undefeated. His very appearance made armies retreat. Moses was 80 years old. He'd led Israel through the Red Sea, through the wilderness, through battles with Amalek and Midian. But this was different. This was fighting something that shouldn't exist. Something God had tried to destroy in the flood. A remnant of the Nephilim corruption that defiled the earth before Noah. Moses did what he always did. He asked God. And God's answer was simple: do not be afraid of him, for I have delivered him into your hands, along with his whole army and his land. Do not be afraid. Easy to say. Harder to do when you're staring up at a king who needs a 13-foot bed. But notice what God said: I have delivered him. Not, I will deliver. Have delivered. Past tense. The battle was already won in heaven before it started on earth. Israel just had to show up and fight. They engaged Og at Edrei, the giant king and his rephaim warriors, against Moses and the generation that had learned to trust God. The text records it with brutal simplicity: so the Lord our God also gave into our hands Og king of Bashan and all his army. We struck them down, leaving no survivors. No survivors. The last giant king fell. The rephaim were destroyed. 60 cities conquered. Og's bed was kept as a monument, not to his power, but to God's. The victory wasn't just military. It was theological. Og represented something deeper than an enemy king. He was a remnant of pre-flood corruption. A descendant of the Nephilim, the hybrid giants born when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans. Genesis 6 records God's response to that corruption: I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. The flood was supposed to erase the Nephilim, cleanse the earth, reset creation. But somehow, the giant bloodline survived. The rephaim, the Anakim, the Emim. Different names, same corruption. Og was the last of them. The final king of a race that shouldn't exist. And when Israel killed Og, they weren't just conquering territory. They were finishing what the flood started. Deuteronomy 3 lists the conquered lands. We took all his cities at that time. There was not one of the 60 cities that we did not take from them, the whole region of Argob, Og's kingdom in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls and with gates and bars, and there were also a great many unwalled villages. 60 fortified cities. Walls to heaven. Gates of bronze. All fell. Israel took Og's land and gave it to the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh. The land of giants became the inheritance of God's people. The last giant king was dead. The rephaim were destroyed. The Nephilim corruption, finally erased. But the bed remained. 13 feet of iron. Physical proof that giants walked the earth. And that God is bigger than giants. Psalm 136 celebrates the victory with repetition. Give thanks to the Lord, for his love endures forever, to him who struck down great kings, and killed mighty kings. Sihon king of the Amorites, and Og king of Bashan, and gave their land as an inheritance. Og became a symbol. A reference point. A reminder. When Israel needed to remember that God fights for them, they remembered Og. When they faced impossible odds, they remembered the 13-foot king who fell. When giants rose up in later generations, Goliath, his brothers, the sons of Anak, Israel had a precedent. God can handle giants. The lesson wasn't, be brave. The lesson was, trust God. Moses was 80. The soldiers were normal-sized humans. They had no advantage except one: God had already delivered the giant into their hands. The battle was won before it started. They just had to show up. This is Og lore. The story of the last giant king and the generation that learned what their fathers didn't. The size of your enemy doesn't matter when God is on your side. Og's bed sat in Rabbah for centuries. 13 feet of iron. Proof that giants existed. Proof that they fell. Every time Israel saw it, they remembered, we killed the king of giants. Not because we were strong. Because God is stronger. The rephaim are gone. The Nephilim bloodline erased. The corruption cleansed. But the lesson remains: whatever giant you're facing, God is bigger. Og was 13 feet tall. Undefeated. Ancient. Terrifying. And he fell in one battle. Because God said, "Do not be afraid. I have delivered him into your hands." Past tense. Already done. Just show up and fight. Your giant isn't too big. Comment, "God is bigger," if you believe it. Drop it right now.